So you know, this is the thing that really gets me is why any 12-year-old understands that they're not supposed to eat dead cows, but all of our land grants, our universities, our colleges, our PhDs, our experts told us, and you know what, the final shoe on that, when the final shoe drops is that we still expect those yo-yos to be in charge of food safety. I mean, they're the ones that gave us mad cow, and now they're trying to say you should trust us with your food to tell you whether it's safe or not. And that's why we've come to a place in our culture where it's perfectly fine to feed your kids Mountain Dew, Twinkies, and Cocoa Puffs, but it's hazardous to feed them raw milk, Aunt Matilda's homemade pickles, and compost-grown tomatoes. So here we are. That's how enlightened we are as a culture. Amazing. So that's why I call myself the lunatic farmer. We are part of the lunatic fringe, the heretics in this orthodoxy of food. So, an herbivore. All right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. Let's pick them. You know, I still get goosebumps over the fact that this plant right here. You know, if I ask a child here or anybody, does anybody have a problem understanding that that sun up there is generating a lot of energy here? We all get that, right? You can feel it. If a cloud goes over, you can feel the energy subside. Okay, I mean there's a lot of energy. But if I ask you to go out, okay, we got good full sun, beautiful day. Could you grab some of those sunbeams? Those sunbeams, lots of energy, right? Could you grab me a couple of those? Hand them to me. Here. Could you grab me a sunbeam? Hand it to me here. Hand me a sunbeam. All right. You know, I mean, this could be like a good children's game, right? You know, I'll trade you 3 sunbeams for 4. You know. All right. The problem with sunbeams is you can't get a hold of them, can you? And isn't it the most amazing miracle that the Creator made it so that plants, these lowly little plants, could reach out and grab sunbeams and turn them into something that we can hand. See, you can grab that, you can weigh it, you can trade it, you can. All right, isn't that cool? So the way this old planet is supposed to work is that it's on a weight gain program. Since the sun started shining and the plants were created, this thing is supposed to be gaining weight. 95 pounds of every one of these, 95 pounds out of 100 pounds is pure sunbeams. Now, if we want to catch as many sunbeams and convert them into decomposable carbonaceous biomass as possible, there are 3 big types of plants. There are trees and bushes or shrubs and grasses. You tend to think, well, the most efficient at catching sunbeams, converting them to carbon and biomass, it must be trees. Look at all that biomass. But it's not. It's grass. Why? A tree is branchy, very inefficient. And what you're seeing there are 40 years of accumulation. If you took 40 years of this growth and stacked it all up, that'd be a pile of biomass. Okay? So grass is way more efficient. But if grass has a problem, it's a living thing. And all living things, they're birthed and they grow real slow when they're first birthed. They grow real slow. And then they grow real fast. And then they actually slow down and die. So if we put this in human terms, I call this down here, this slow growth period, I call that diaper grass. Are you ever going to learn to use the potty, right? I call this part right here teenage grass. You know, Remember when you could eat a half a gallon of ice cream and it didn't stay on your hips? You know, now it's over the lips and on the hips, right? And then out here, I call this nursing home grass. Okay? So you got 3 stages of life. Diaper, teenage, nursing home. Okay? To help us to visualize this. Now, if my job is to catch as many sunbeams as possible and convert them to carbon that can decompose and feed the soil biota and make the hydrology and the soil life and all that function so that it can capture more sunbeams, of these 3 phases, where do I want the vegetation more often, as much as possible? Teenage, thank you. Move to the head of the class. I mean, you have just described the most fundamental ecological principle. And yet, who gets up in the morning, showering, thinking, I wonder how much teenage grass I can make today? How many earthworms can I feed today? But it really does become that simple, doesn't it? Well, obviously, if this grows and goes into senescence, into nursing home grass, it stops collecting solar energy. And if it never can ramp up out of diaper stage, it doesn't collect very much. So both overgrazing and undergrazing are equally detrimental to the capture of solar energy into decomposable biomass. So why does the world have so many herbivores? I mean, think about it. If we start the American bison and elk and moose, and you head down to South America, and you've got alpacas and llamas and guinea pigs, and you head over into Africa. Well, Africa's got how many gazelles and giraffes and elephants, and all right. Then you head up on into India. You got water buffalo, and you get on up into reindeer and Lapland. And there are herbivores all over the place. Why? Because they are God's pruners. So that the vegetation, as it goes into this senescent, this nursing home period, they bite it off, okay, to restart this teenage growth spurt. That's why they're here. They're not here to melt the polar cap. An acre of healthy grass sequesters 10 times more methane than ever comes out of the belch of a cow. Okay? This is the way it works. There's way more regeneration than degeneration if it's functioning properly. So the herbivore is there. I call the herbivore nature's biomass accumulation restart button. Okay? It's like hitting that restart button. Well, how does nature do it? Well, with migratory herds. They migrate, they move, all right? So how do we do that if they can't migrate, if we actually own them and the courthouse says we own this property and the neighbors don't want them to go over there? How do we duplicate that? We duplicate it with electric fence. We don't have wolves, we don't have fire, we don't have 3 million head of buffalo. What we do have is electric fence that is the technological aha that allows us to take all these factors that used to move the migratory herds to do this kind of short-term pruning and then long-term rest before they migrate back. We can now do it on a scalable, on 1 acre or 1 million acres with electric fence that allows us to place the herd where they're supposed to be to do the pruning, just like an orchardist would prune an apple tree or a viticulturalist would prune a vineyard. The environmentalists don't lambast the viticulturists, the wine industry. Those guys are cutting vegetation. They're destroying the environment, cutting the vegetation on their vineyard. No, we realize that is key to refreshing and refurbishing and making new, vibrant, additional growth. And it's the same way the herbivore is here. So every day we move the cows. So yesterday, as you can tell by the cow pies, they were where you're standing yesterday, last evening. I moved them into here, and then they go next. You've already got a cross fence set up. And so the electric fence becomes our steering wheel, accelerator, and brake on that four-legged portable sauerkraut vat. God's pruning machine, okay? And that is exactly how you build soil and you capture sunbeams and convert them into vegetation that is sucking in carbon dioxide, exhaling the oxygen, retaining the carbon down here. So we call this mob stocking or herbivorous solar conversion lignified carbon sequestration fertilization. And if every farm in the United States would practice this model, we would sequester all the carbon that's been emitted since the beginning of the industrial age in fewer than 10 years. That's how efficacious this is. Because that's where it was. You know, a lot of people don't realize that 500 years ago, there were way more pounds of animal in what is today the U.S. than there are today. Way more pounds. So, you know, the problem is not animals, the problem is how they're managed. And I absolutely get that, you know, herbivores have done a lot of damage throughout history, okay? But don't blame the herbivore, it's the management of the herbivore that can be either positive or negative. And so these cows are moved every day. You can see a portable loafing, again, portable shelter. This is a portable loafing shelter. So we get the manure out where we want it, give them a clean place to lounge, and we move it along so that the manure and urine goes where we want it instead of where they want it, like a portable shade tree, and just moved around the field. Questions? They're moved every day. Yes, every day. Between 4 and 6 o'clock usually. We move them in the evening because that gives them the longest contented grazing time. If you move them in the morning, sun comes up, gets hot, they want to stop grazing before they're actually full. So by moving them in the evening, it's, you know, you're in a cooling time, all right, and so you've got all night to be content. So when the sun comes up in the morning, now they're all, you know, tanked up and full, and they just want to go to the sofa and lounge, okay, until 4 o'clock when you move them again.
Sir?
Another thing is that is when the Brix is highest. The Brix is a measure of sugar. In the plant, the Brix actually rises and falls. That's how winemakers decide when to pull grapes, is when the Brix is high, because it's all about fermentation. Well, she's a fermentation tank, all right? And so the Brix is highest in the afternoon, lowest in the morning. And so that gives them access to this really high Brix level as they move on. There's also no dew in the afternoon. The dew can actually water down their rumen and make digestion more difficult, like having too much water in your applesauce or all right, or your sauerkraut, okay? And so you don't want any more juice than the plant is creating for perfect rumen function. If it's got dew on it, then it's way too much water as they eat it, and they don't digest as efficiently as well. So there's a lot of nuances to that. Doesn't mean that we're religious and would never move them in the morning. It just means, you know, as a general rule, you know, we try to move them in the afternoon. Yes. Yes. Finishing cows on corn before slaughter. Well, that is our culture's current, you know, orthodoxy of our day is feedlots, grain finishing. The problem with that is that it is very detrimental to the beast, to the rumen, to the system, and actually, you know, if you didn't slaughter them when you did, their livers would all explode and they would die, you know, if you kept them on that hot ration all the time. The other thing that it does is that it does a lot of things. It completely flips the omega-3, omega-6 balance, which is not a good thing. And one of the most interesting things that we now know, and this is fairly new, is that in just 14 days of grain feeding, it chases all the conjugated linoleic acid out of the body. What's the importance of CLA? CLA provides the bounce for the synapses. So as you age, your synapses become more brittle. You know, think back to your 10th grade biology, you know, and the flex, those whips as your nerve endings move across. And so it's also the #1 anti-carcinogen. For years,